I have seen a show called Sarah Kendall, Paper Planes. Sarah Kendall is a stand-up comedian. Paper Planes is kind of her story of procrastinating and following the idea of her in her journey in trying to write a book which doesn't end up existing, but it's her journey about her trying to write it and realising that it's probably better for her that she doesn't. Even though that sounds a little bit anticlimactic, it does work and it does make sense in context. She's got a very good structure for her stand-up. It mimics that of a book. So she's got the opening, she's got her prologue and her epilogue, and then the main bulk of her comedy is done in the form of chapters. Each chapter consists of a small anecdote, which again is something to do with her journey in writing the book. And at the start of each chapter is her looking at her phone and describing the news stories that she is seeing on her news app. I recognised every single one of them, bar maybe two. And a lot of them are very depressing, very much a reminder of how terrible the human race can be and about how shit the world is right now. Felt a little bit disheartening. The ending, in comparison, not spoiling, but was very heartfelt. The prologue and epilogue are both centred around the idea of her kid asking her really difficult questions and Sarah trying to find a way of answering them in the form of a story to help her kids understand the world a little bit better, but not traumatising them at the same time. She does say a few times throughout her stand-up that she likes stories and she uses stories to understand the world around her, which I really like because I think I do the same thing. It's a lot easier to understand what you're seeing and what's happening when you put it into the context of a story. I will say that her humour is quite dark, not in the sense of like sadistic dark humour, but it's a little bit depressing. She does say that herself one or two times in her show that she is a depressing person, which honestly same. I think it's getting to a point that most people kind of get into this moment that you just realise how terrible everything is, that you do start to become a little bit depressing. She is very funny, like a lot of her jokes were really good, and I could tell because even if I wasn't laughing, the audience around me were. A lot of the reasons that I didn't laugh was pretty much because I didn't understand the references she was making. She mentioned a lot of famous names, a lot of famous people that I didn't have a clue who they were. And she did explain who they were, even to the other audience members, that she'd say a name and they'd say, who? And she'd explain who they were, and suddenly everyone was like, oh right, okay, we know who you're talking about now. I still didn't. I presume that was a generation thing. It became a lot more obvious at the end of the show, when we were all leaving. I became very aware that I was the youngest person in that audience, which probably explains why a lot of her jokes and a lot of her references were going over my head, is because I don't understand them. Because either they're older jokes or they're references from things that happened way before my consciousness was at a point where I would remember that happening, or it's experiences that I've not had yet. I would be interested to see this exact thing again in about 5 or 10 years time and see how much more I get, because I have a feeling that I'll find it a lot more funny if I was a bit older. Obviously the date references of movies that came out like 20 years ago or like even 15 years ago, I wouldn't know about. I'm in my early 20s. I would give Sarah Kendall 3 out of 5 stars because she is very funny, and you could tell that by the audience around me and behind me who were laughing at a lot more of the jokes than I was. I would definitely say that this comedian is one for the slightly older generation. If you are in your 20s or younger, you will probably not understand a lot of her references. There are plenty of younger comedians out there, especially at the Fringe, and it is quite nice to see one that's a little bit more mature on the stage, who is so interactive with her audiences as well. She made eye contact with almost every single person in that audience. She was very aware of us there, but she didn't feel intimidated and she didn't feel scared. I did enjoy her, even if a lot of the jokes went over my head. If you found my review helpful, please consider buying Edinburgh Culture Review a coffee using our Ko-fi page. There should be a link somewhere in the description for that. And enjoy the fringe.